Okay, C-SPAN released this video yesterday, and now I want you to share this video with everybody you know, guys. This is very, very important. Our future and our freedoms depend on getting this information out. Listen to this.
How many Americans will lose their lives or their loved ones to rampant gun violence before the United States Senate takes action?
Now, let me just stop. The springboard for every gun confiscation, gun control, background check, whatever you want to call it, it's an infringement. Every infringement starts with their springboard, and that is gun violence. It's a euphemism that is nonsense. There's no such thing as gun violence. What's happening is human beings are deciding to be violent against other human beings, and they're using tools called guns to kill human beings. They could use a knife, and they do, 1,500 times a year, as opposed to rifles, which is about 400 times a year. So, quote unquote, knife violence is more prevalent than this supposed gun violence they're talking about. And they're trying to eliminate the AR-15, you know, the assault style, scary black military grade rifles, so-called. This is nonsense. They use these euphemisms to scare people. They use these euphemisms to incrementally take away your rights. That's how these people operate.
So far this year, more than 9,000 Americans, that's in 7 months, have been killed by gun violence, including those killed.
They haven't been killed by gun violence. They've been murdered by maniacs. They've been killed by murderers, by people who should either be behind bars or taken to a place where they can meet their maker more quickly than the rest of us. It's not gun violence. No one has been killed by gun violence. Anybody who's died either died of natural causes or at the hand of somebody else. Gun violence is ridiculous.
In more than 250 mass shootings this year in America.
So tell us how many people died in Chicago last month. It's around 50, but nobody's talking about Chicago. Chicago is one of the most heavily regulated cities in the United States, and there's rampant what they would call gun violence. Their laws are not working because they're disarming quote-unquote law-abiding citizens. If you're a law-abider, you've put yourself behind the 8 ball. You've subjugated yourself to the politicians. You're trusting your government, and the greedy, insane, psychopathic criminals out there are glad you're obeying criminals because they're not going to obey criminals. You're going to obey the criminals and disarm yourself. Criminals aren't going to do that, and they're going to have a field day like what's happening in Chicago, like what's happening in Baltimore.
The attacks in El Paso, in Dayton, in Gilroy, California, and the violence, all within about 7 days of one another, more than the neighborhood of 50 Americans lost their lives to gun violence.
He just keeps banging on gun violence. Gun violence. It's about gun violence. We got to do something about the guns.
Some 5 months ago, on February 27th, 2019, the House of Representatives passed a bill, H.R. 8, a bill that is supported by over 95% of Americans.
I don't believe that statistic, guys. Were you ever asked about this bill? This is the bill right here. This is H.R. 8. We're going to go over this in a second, just briefly, because it's look how lengthy it is. I know it's just one page, but it's convoluted. It's very convoluted, and it works against you. And the title of this bill is the Bipartisan Background Checks Act of 2019. How are they going to enforce this? Well, they'll enforce the Bipartisan Background Checks Act of 2019, which actually serves to bar you. It serves as an infringement between you and your access to a life-saving firearm. That is what this act does. And how are they going to enforce this act? Why, they, the politicians, these guys right here, they're going to enforce this act by the barrel of a gun, or what they would term gun violence. So they're going to use gun violence to enforce a Bipartisan Background Checks Act of 2019 to prevent gun violence. That's how evil and hypocritical and ironic this whole thing is. And this 95% of Americans sign on to this right here. I don't recall anybody ever asking me. Do you recall anybody asking you if you consent to this? I don't. And let's say it's 99%. The 99% cannot enforce the politician's will against the remaining 1%. It's why? Because it's immoral. You can't force somebody to do something they don't want to do if they haven't harmed, threatened to harm, or stolen somebody else's stuff. You can't threaten somebody and go against their will, but that's exactly what they want to do. If 1% resist it and don't want to consent to it, then they can't be forced to do it, because you know how they're going to force you to do this. You know how they're going to force the remaining 1%, or in this case, 5%. He says 95% are on board with this HR 8. They're going to enforce it by the barrel of a gun. Men with guns will come to your house, and if they found that you bought a firearm without going through the background check process, well, they deem you as a criminal, and they're going to come at you with what they would term gun violence. It's irony and hypocrisy all rolled into one.
Passed the House of Representatives and sent to the United States Senate, where, sadly, it languishes.
Sadly, that's not sad. Now, if it's true, and this C-SPAN video was uploaded yesterday, August 13th. It's August 14th right now. If what he's saying is true, it seems like, and I know there's only 1,500 views on this C-SPAN video, but look at the stats. 81 dislikes to 83 likes. That's about 50%. And if what he's saying is true, you'd see this blue bar right here somewhere over here for 95%. This is a 50-50. This is in the neighborhood of 50-50 right here, guys. The people that are viewing what he's saying specifically about this bill that he says has 95% American support doesn't even have 50% support right here. And I'm sure it's going to be worse after people watch this video. If you guys, I'll leave the link to this C-SPAN video right here, and you guys let me know what you think about HR 8. Maybe we should do our own, study. Maybe we should do our own poll and find out what people really think about HR 8. We're going to read it in a second, but and it doesn't even matter what our poll determines, because it's never right to initiate unjust force and violence on peaceful people who haven't done anything wrong. And that includes a background check law. Look at some of these comments. Politicians have caused more deaths on Americans than any damn guns. Sick of this. Go after criminals, not good citizens. Duh. And I do not believe any of you give two craps when good people are killed. We already have background checks. Exactly what type of checks are they talking about, and which category of U.S. citizens are they seeking to make criminals? Because that's what they're doing. When you make a law, anybody who doesn't obey your law becomes a criminal in their eyes. Let's look at HRA. Well, let's just finish this video here.
Is it the solution to all this violence? It is not. But 95% of Americans support it because they believe it is a significant and important step to take in the face of this violence.
And by golly, we're going to support those 95% by enacting our own gun violence to make sure people obey our rules.
The House has acted, and it is time, past time, for the House to act. We had a sit-in some 2 years ago, actually 3, on June 22nd, 2016. Since that time, we believe there are in the neighborhood of some 25,000 plus lives that have been lost.
And if we don't act, if we the politicians don't act, more lives will be jeopardized. More lives will end. Now, as in good politician fashion, they of course try to play on the heartstrings of emotion, and they bring this girl up who is the leader of her March for Our Lives chapter in whatever state she's in. I think it was Maryland, and she's holding up the picture of somebody who died, allegedly died to gun violence. And of course, they're going to try to move you with emotion because that's the way they get bills and laws passed. But let's just take a look at some of the wording of H.R. 8 and this firearms transfer. It shall be unlawful for any person who is not a licensed importer, licensed manufacturer, licensed dealer. In other words, you need to have permission from us, the government, to import, to manufacture, to be a dealer, to transfer a firearm to any other person who is not so licensed, unless a licensed importer, licensed manufacturer, licensed dealer has first taken possession of the firearm for the purpose of complying with this subsection. You need to comply with our laws. If you don't comply with our laws, if you don't get the proper licensing, then you are a criminal. B, upon taking possession of a firearm under paragraph A, a licensee shall comply or die with all requirements of this chapter, as if the licensee were transferring the firearm from the inventory of the licensee to the unlicensed transferee. C, if a transfer of a firearm described in subparagraph A will not be completed for any reason after a licensee takes possession of the firearm, including because transfer of the firearm to or receipt of the firearm by the transferee would violate this chapter, the return of the firearm to the transfer or by the licensee shall not constitute the transfer of a firearm for the purposes under this chapter. You want a firearm, you need to go through our background checks. Yeah, I know. You may be in a tough neighborhood and you need that gun right now, but you know what? You're just going to have to wait because we need to keep guns out of the hands of bad people. Look at this. See all these words right here? See all these words? You want to see how simple it really should be? How easy it should be to live in this country? The founders knew it. 4 words. Shall not be infringed. What would you rather have? Shall not be infringed or all this crap? And this is a short one, guys. HR 8 is 1 page. Look, that's it. 6 sections, 1 page. But look at all those freaking words. Oh, exceptions shall not apply to law enforcement agency to transfer that is loan bona fide. All these subsections, exceptions. Refer to paragraph A, section, subsection 1A, part 11. What? How about this? How about shall not be infringed? I like shall not be infringed. Because you know what shall not be infringed means? It means these political parasites, these overlords right here, they can't take our rights and then issue them back to us when we pay for a quote-unquote license, permission from the state to do what we have a dang right to do in the first place. Leave your thoughts about this for the world, the Google Thought Police, and all the political parasites who think it's okay to infringe on your rights in the comment section below. I'll see you guys in the next heavily censored shadow ban video.